I could carry on all day because I've got very many benefits from this. I'd want people to do this at school.
How long have you had chronic fatigue?
I'm not sure. I had anorexia for 7 years, and then it went into binge eating for 3. And then I think it was probably about after the binge eating, or maybe during, that it started. So it was probably about 4 or 5 years ago. And I didn't really know what was going on.
You found out about this because your aunt knew about it, because she had asthma, is that right?
Exactly. She remembered she'd got this word, butekon, anyway. I asked her about it. And then my uncle, her husband, went online and found you. And that's how it really started.
Yeah. Curious the way people come to us.
It's very funny, isn't it? If someone had said the word buteko in January even, I would have been like, oh, okay, what's that? Now it's part of daily life, so it's great.
Yeah. What was your life like back then?
I'd say it was more unpredictable, and I was very much more in a survival state. I had sort of, I'd managed to just about keep on top of my eating and things, still having a few OCD habits with it, etc. But my energy was very limiting. I would find it very hard to go up and down stairs and showering and washing and things, and was very limited with what I was capable to do work-wise. I had been doing gardening prior to getting ME, or chronic fatigue syndrome, and I just wasn't able to do that anymore. Generally, I was in a sort of tired and wired, very adrenaline driven state, even though I didn't have much stress in my life, really. I was very lucky. I was very well supported by my family, but the fact that I couldn't do much work was really getting to me with my mood, and just how I really just wanted to be independent and be able to live like someone my age and just, do things, really.
What was your social life like?
It didn't exist, really. I was very lucky because I met my boyfriend just prior to getting ME. He's been extremely patient with me, and it's been great. But I have to say, as I think you said before, living with someone who is ill is very hard. And I think I'd be quite fearful of whether not only is the ME going to take my work away, but is it going to take relationships away from me, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
I've always been quite a sensitive person and quite a people pleaser, and I found it very hard to say no, which have contributed in some ways to getting ME. I wasn't very confident around people, I'd say, probably before, and I've definitely seen changes since.
But I think that thing of not being able to say no is very characteristic of people with ME.
Oh, really? Okay.
It's actually a symptom.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it took a lot for me to say no.
And I think, I don't know whether it was the fact that I didn't know how they'd react, and so I felt out of control, whereas if I said what they wanted me to say, I wouldn't have to deal with a reaction. And I don't know whether that was just because I didn't feel I had the energy, or because I was embarrassed if I expressed my own opinion and they didn't agree with it.
Fear of disagreement, fear of rejection, fear of not being liked, all of those things.
Yes, exactly.
Generally, the whole system's full of fear.
Yes, completely. In fact, I would say that probably sums it up. My day was very fear-driven. Would I be able to get in the car? Would I have an accident? Would I fall asleep? Would I mess up I was able to do some bookkeeping for my father, and I'd just be terrified that I'd be too tired and I'd send something to the wrong person, or So fear was what was driving me, I should think. And yes.
Would you like to say something about the benefits that you've actually seen?
Yes, of course. Yes. Well, on that note of probably saying no, if I start maybe with the mental ones, it's quite, I don't know why it makes me laugh, but I think because I'm in such a different place, one, I should say I can probably be quite strong now, as in like I can voice my opinion. I mean, still probably in a little bit more of a polite way, but I feel strong enough to be able to resist. I guess it's also the chatter in my head that would be like, oh, if you say no, this will happen. That all of that mental chatter, the self-doubt, the self-criticism, all of that, that almost punishing myself, it's almost completely gone. Or when it surfaces, I'm able to just be like, okay, right, that's something else. I'm not going to listen to that. That has been a huge benefit. Also, I would say that I'm just generally in a much less depressed state. It's not like I'm on a high, it's a very level, calm, just rational place. Things don't send me into that fight or flight. Also, I think I'm able to see things, before I'd be very much like, oh, this is all my fault sort of thing. I'd sort of make up a story in my head. If someone, I don't know, say someone was cross with me, I'd be like, oh gosh, this is because I've done this, rather than looking at the bigger picture being, oh, they've actually had quite a bad day. I probably have triggered them, but something else has caused it. Whereas now I'm immediately assessing the whole situation rather than just focusing on what I've done wrong. And physically, I think there are two things that I would say have hugely improved. One is I don't feel this very weightedness that I used to feel with the ME. I'd feel very achy. And when I'd wake up, it would be as if I was lifting, I don't know, however many kilos out of bed to just get downstairs. And I'd also have sort of, I don't know, there would be like little impulses, just very high sensitivity. So no one would be able, if I brushed against something, they would just be very sensitive. That has practically completely gone. Very, very occasionally will I get it and I'll be able to do a practice or a maximum pause and it will go. And the other thing has been sleep, which I think is one of the most exciting things, because with the eating disorder, with the chronic fatigue, I'd be physically exhausted, but mentally quite wired. I wouldn't be able to fall asleep until the early hours in the morning. And then once I got to sleep, I would be literally out for about 14 hours or so. Get up, when I'd wake up, I'd be able to just about drive to do some work for my dad, do that, eat. And then when I ate anything, I'd always have to sleep afterwards. And I'd also get quite worried about binging if I hadn't had enough sleep, because that would usually trigger a binge. Whereas now I'm not advocating this to be done, but for instance, I was able to not sleep. I didn't have any sleep last night actually, and I was still able, one, to be rational, two, to drive, and three, to do work. And I did manage to get an hour and a half rest and then another hour and a half rest today, but I'm so much more in tune with my body and I don't have those sort of cravings to eat. And because I haven't had to sleep so many hours and I don't binge and then feel the shame and then all of the rest, I'm able to be so much more reliable. So I'm able now to work, but also will maybe get a bit more work now as well. But I'm able to just look after myself. I'm able to get up, get dressed, go downstairs without an issue. I'm able to cook. I'm able to clean again. I'm able to mow the grass and also socialize. So it's, I think the improvement with sleep and the fact that the boutique has allowed me to, even if I don't get much sleep, I'm still able to function, has been one of the hugest things. So much more present, I think. I'm also able to say things. For instance, I think one of the reasons I would get quite low often is because I'd say things to people, say I was being criticized, and I'd be very quick to agree with them. Or I would also maybe, say something to pacify the situation, and it maybe wasn't quite in tune with what I actually believed. And so that discrepancy would often, I'd come away from the situation being really angry with myself because I felt I hadn't stuck to what sat well with me.
Mm.
So now if a criticism happens, I'm just less sensitive. I'm able to brush it aside, but also I feel if I needed to, I'd be able to, and I have done, say, oh, actually, I'm thinking, you could consider it this way or something. And so I don't feel like I punish myself as badly when I come out of the situation because I've said what I actually think.
Yeah, well, I also found that if I wasn't understanding a situation, I could actually formulate a question that would help me to understand.
Wow, okay. That's incredible.
Mm.
I have to say, you have given me lots of tips, and I know just for future people to know that Martha has been very wonderful and patient with me. And I was actually quite scared of you to start with. And I think it was maybe because I saw you in a place that maybe I wanted to be, and I wasn't there, and I couldn't understand how to get there. Anyway, it was funny enough, it was a week after I'd started the beginner's course, and the beginner's course was going really well, and I'd done the week and I hadn't got any symptoms coming out yet. And by the second week, I found I was getting quite low and feelings that I hadn't had for a very long time. And I almost gave up, but I wrote an email to Marcel, and Marcel got me onto you. And this was 1 o'clock in the morning, and you just literally talked me through. You just did a few breathing pauses with me, and I felt that you really cared about everyone on your course. And however rude or, not wanting to do it, you just stuck with them and supported them until they started to really see the benefits. And now I don't feel intimidated, I'm afraid, at all, but I just feel I can talk to you so openly and also share a lot of experiences. It's funny also, I really found it useful doing the classes, even though to start with, I was very anxious about doing it with other people. I think one of the things I remember you saying was that it's really, really beneficial to actually do it with others and see, one, what they're going through, but also it's almost like having an accountability buddy that that you've got practice that evening. And okay, you might dread it to start with, but after you've done it, it's like a bit like going to the gym or something like that. You feel so much better. And I used to remember my boyfriend, I'd go into practice and I'd be like, oh, I really don't want to do this. And I'd come out and he wouldn't know what's happened because I'd be almost skipping down the stairs. I'd get very excited and my voice would, go off, and I'd have energy until I don't know what time in the morning. And he'd be like, sorry, I really have to go to bed. I'm so sorry. It was brilliant. So I would definitely say to people, however much you're dreading doing it or you feel that it isn't for you, just to stick with it and make use of you and Marcel or whoever else is doing it, because that's what really helped me.
What you're pointing out is something that is a real problem for this method, is the mind.
Yes.
And you think that you don't want to go to the workshop. Well, what do you think it's like for us? We don't necessarily want to teach it.
I was going to say, I think it's one of the, a bit like you're saying, when ill people are coming, you've got a room of ill people. And
it's the mind. It produces this negativity.
Mind.
That's what it does. It's just standard. And so, you get to the workshop and you start and everything's great. It's fine. There's no problem.
Yes.
It's just that you've got this narrative going on in your head that's moaning away.
Yes, it's that. It is exactly that. And it's so strong to start with. And I think that's what's great. I feel now that mind isn't
It's not running the show anymore.
It's not running the show. It's
Yeah.
not running the show.
It's
Yeah,
not.
and I'm sure that you and Marcella, oh my goodness, here we go. Right, okay.
It's just that that's what the mind does.
Yes.
And so just get used to it. So what it's there to start, it produces these messages. There's some kind of programming in there. And that kind of programming is partly because of low CO2. And the thing is that program doesn't necessarily go.
Yes.
What happens is that you get to know it.
Okay.
So you can step aside from it.
Okay, that makes sense. When you sort of know I'm not saying it's a demon or whatever it is, you're able, if you know it's there, you can then separate yourself.
Yeah, but I mean, most people are living the messages that their mind produces. They identify with that message and they see that as themselves.
Yes, that is exactly it. That is exactly it.
Well, with this method, you can see the messaging that keeps popping up. It's the same old message. They're the same tape recordings going on and on.
Yeah.
And you start, because you're looking at your breath and you're watching your breath, you can actually start to see the messages and separate off from them.
Yes.
And the mind is not like that at all.
No. And that was definitely apparent the week after I'd done it. It was like, I'm not having this.
Yes, it decided that it was going to take charge again.
Yeah.
So then you go to the practitioner and they kind of take over so that you can get through that bit and get out the other side so that you can take charge again. That's the process. Every now and again, you get taken over by the mind, and then the practitioner steps in again to help you to take yourself back again.
And I think actually that's a very good point you're making, because I think, if I get this correctly, that the practitioner is there to help you, but also to help you help yourself. So they're not, if you don't put the work in also, you won't get the benefits. But it's not to say that the practitioners aren't there to support you, but it's also you take control. And that's one of the benefits, because even when the practitioners aren't there, you can still cleanse yourself of symptoms.
You can hear the practitioner.
Exactly. I always think about what you told me about the back, and I think that you told me that when I was in quite a bit of a state, and I found it really useful just also being aware of that space behind your back. Funny enough, even when I think about it now, I hear your voice with it, but it's also, I notice that it's my diaphragm or my belly or whatever it is, it's relaxed as soon as I straighten my spine, see that space, it just automatically is. And the other great thing is I'd be very conscious of my belly. That was what had caused really, well, one of the reasons with my eating disorder. And now I am a little bit like Marcel says, I'm very proud to stick my belly out because I know that also means if I look down and my belly's out, I know that I'm doing something better than I was.
You're breathing, so you're breathing shallow.
Yes. And on another, I could carry on all day because I've got very many benefits from this, and I know I'm not fully there yet, but I've always had an absolute phobia of dancing. And we've had a follow-up class, and I remember anyway you saying about it's wonderfully interesting to see people who dance with their back and their whole body. And anyway, so I got up there, my mother and everyone else was so shocked, and I started dancing. And I was dancing with my whole body this time, not just my front. And they came away and they were like, what on earth has happened, Sarah? And that's so lovely when people around you notice the difference.
I remember when I was getting a bit grumpy and skeptical in the days when I was learning this method. I'd had asthma and I'd had pneumonia, and Christopher pointed out to me that there was no reversal for pneumonia or asthma or COPD or emphysema. If you had COPD, emphysema, or very serious asthma, that was for life. That was it. There was no cure.
That is such a good point. If someone were to come to me now with chronic condition, or in fact with anything, and they would say, what would you recommend? And I would say Buteyko. That would be, I mean, okay, you're welcome to try anything else, but if you really want something that works and that also gives you not only hope, but belief that you can actually have a life with those conditions that medicine hasn't found a way of reversing. I think that is what's so powerful about Buteyko. One of the things I remember noting to myself when I'm having a tough day is, if I'm suffering from symptoms of a cleanse with a Buteyko, I would have suffered those symptoms anyway. They would be ongoing. If I'm doing a Buteyko practice and I trigger a symptom, I know, in fact, I almost want to trigger symptoms now, because I know that those symptoms, they actually mean something. Before it, they didn't mean anything. Whereas now, I might as well do the Buteyko. If I have symptoms with a cleanse, at least I have a future. I can get better. If I just leave my symptoms, they'll just persist. And also what you were saying about emphysema, dementia, pulmonary, all of these things, there isn't anything out there that really people feel will help them to reverse those symptoms.
Yeah, you don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. And I think that was the thing when I started this, I started it, I hadn't slept properly for 14 years. And after 3 days of practice, I slept through the night.
Wow, that is amazing.
That was huge. And every time I practiced, I had about half an hour to an hour without brain fog.
That is one of the other huge benefits. You're alert in a funny way. I don't know whether that was what you were finding, but you could function really highly.
Yeah.
That is incredible. After simply 3 days, you were able to already feel the benefit.
Well, that was it. The light was literally at the end of the tunnel. I knew I had a way to go, but I knew that if I just stuck to it, I would get out the other side. And I mean, for somebody who's been stuck in this trap for years on end, you can't believe your luck, really. And the other thing is your mind is busy telling you all sorts of messages to tell you it's ridiculous. How do you think you're going to get better holding your nose? You must be mad if you think that's going to work.
Yes, absolutely. But I think the other thing is that there is also science behind this method, isn't there? I'd want people to do this at school, so we don't get to the stage where we find it really hard to do shallow breathing.
Well, it could just be a challenge or a laugh to be able to hold your breath for a certain length of time and to be able to stand as a statue for 3 minutes. If people could just do that as an exercise before they do sport or after they do sport, it would be a good skill to have.
Absolutely.
And it would save all the ADHD and the dyslexia and all of that.
Yes. And actually, that's another point. I can string sentences together much more easily. I mean, I know I still, not stutter, but I try and sometimes find it hard to find words, but I can read more easily. I don't find it as hard to piece together a sentence. And as you say, there's that calmness. So with the ADHD,
it's the agitation that you get, constant agitation, not able to sit still. Or you might sit still for a few minutes and then you're getting up and walking around.
Yes.
It's just impossible.
It is.
You made quite a lot of comments, useful comments about the practice itself, because it's not easy, is it?
No, it's not easy. What I found, and I'm a bit of a control freak, so I don't like being told what to do. And so I probably have broken a few rules, but what I found was I started by focusing on one element of what I was being taught by you both. The first one was to increase my maximum pauses. I found my mind was still very strong, all those messages. And so I would attach something enjoyable to my practice. This was actually one of the things you'd mentioned to me, either watching something quite calming, so a nature program, or it could be listening to something, or if you're creative, drawing or something. It was also to distract me, my respiratory center and my mind from looking at the clock. And often if I looked at the clock, I would want to give up earlier than I probably could. So that was one of the first things that really helped me, was doing something alongside to increase my maximum pause. So I didn't notice that it had been 45 seconds gone. The other thing I found really useful was to, on certain days when I really, really dreaded it, I would just do lots of maximum pauses, one after the other. I'd stop and then normalize my breathing and then start again. And then I do my very shallow breathing at the end. And I was able to up the numbers. And then after I'd focused on getting my maximum pause up, I then focused on reducing the protein I ate. A lot of that actually came naturally. I'm a vegetarian and I really cannot digest tofu now, especially with doing practice. I find it just doesn't work. One of the things I'd also do, which Marcel had suggested, would be to take my control pause, eat a certain food, and then take my control pause again a few minutes later to see if it had gone down. That way I was able to eliminate foods that really weren't agreeing with me, let's say. Then after I focused on that, I'm now focusing on very shallow breathing. And I found it quite hard to get air hunger, to know that feeling. And now I do a lot of the things that you had said about just dropping my weight into the chair or whatever. And also actually playing about with positions after I've done my maximum pause. So going on all fours or stretching my spine out or leaning up against a wall, and really just focusing on the relaxation of my diaphragm. If you're feeling particularly overwhelmed, for me at least, I broke it down and now I'm able to practice regularly and in a way that I would like to and that is recommended.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is you did what was essential. And the essential thing is to get your pauses up. And then once you've done that, then you've got a higher level of CO2. And because you've got a higher level of CO2 building up in your body, your capacity to do more gradually improves.
Exactly.
It comes down to CO2 in the end. It's always about the CO2. I mean, these pauses look like they're barbaric, and it is a very gross practice. It's the basic practice. It's actually the essential practice. Doesn't matter what you do in the future, it always comes back to getting the maximum pauses. And the reason is because you've got to get the higher dose.
Yeah.
And if you can't get that higher dose, you won't be able to get the very fine, shallow breathing. You can't get it.
I think that was why now I find it much easier to do the very shallow breathing. And to start with, I was really puzzled. I just couldn't find it.
Well, you look for it after the pauses, because that's when it's easier.
Yes.
And when you've had a break, your breathing deepens, so it's harder to do. So of course it's going to be difficult to do it. And that's why we start the workshop off doing shallow breathing, to demonstrate how difficult it is to do it. It's not easy.
Yes. I think now I want to have a poster on my wall. You got a heart around CO2 or something.
Yeah, and it's got such a bad name.
I know.
Waste gas, it's causing climate change, and actually if you look into the chemistry, it's essential. It's an essential food for the body. It's essential to plant life.
Yes.
Essential to life. It's more important than oxygen, actually.
I was going to say.
We're dealing with something quite controversial, and it's also counterintuitive. So it's not easy to access this. In fact, that's why we go to people who are chronically ill, because they're more prepared to try something that's contradictory, because they're all just desperate. They don't have much left.
That makes so much sense. It's the desperation that I was willing to try anything. I was getting desperate after 4 years. I tried lots of different things. And as you say, I think the frustration is, if I'd known this before.
No, but you wouldn't have done it before, maybe.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. I wouldn't have had the drive, maybe.
Well, I saw this method in the late 90s. That was about 8 years before I started. I met it as a treatment for asthma, and I got asthma and migraine as well. I took one look at it and I thought, I'm not doing that. There's no way. And then when I met it the next time, I thought, oh God, I've got to do that.
I've seen this before somewhere.
Oh, it's that.
Yes.
Well, it's a real blessing. And it's a real blessing to meet the people that are willing to learn it and willing to do the work. So,
Yeah.
you know, congratulations.
Well, thank you. I well up when I think about it, but I really am very, very grateful to you and Marcel and my aunt and uncle for getting me on this.
3-4 months it took, and your
Yeah.
life changed.
Completely.
Well done.
Thank you.
How do you think you're going to get better holding your nose? You must be mad if you think that's going to work.